Hi class, my name is Jose Salcedo. Today I will be doing the combined speech, persuasive and informative. Here's my audience member, Sofia Ibarra. So let's start. I want you to imagine something for a second, okay? Imagine it's your first day at a new school where you don't know a single person and you don't understand what the teacher is saying because he's speaking in a language that you don't understand. You're too afraid to raise your hand because you're still learning the language and you don't want to feel embarrassed in front of everyone when you make a mistake or mispronounce a word. For many newcomer students, that's not just what their first day of school feels like, that's what every day feels like when they first arrive in the United States. I myself went through a similar experience when I first arrived to the United States. So that made me wonder uh, what other newcomer students experience, and more importantly, what schools can do to help them succeed. To answer that question, I interviewed former newcomer students, teachers, counselors, and school staff, and I also looked at research on newcomer education. As I started putting everything together, one question stood out to me. How can schools support newcomer students so they feel confident, included, and successful both academically and socially? The first thing that stood out to me was that learning English isn't the only challenge the students face. One of the first people I interviewed was former ELD student Andrea Agredo during our interview on July 24, 2026 in Salinas, California. Andrea shared with me that she moved here from Colombia. Learning English was difficult, but adjusting to a new culture was just as challenging. She even experienced bullying because of the way she spoke Spanish, which made her even harder for her to feel like she belonged. According to education researcher Sam Finn and the Policy Analysis for California Education report Newcomer Education in California, published in May 2023, California serves between 150,000 and 250,000 newcomer students. The report explains that many of these students need not only English instruction, but also academic, emotional, and social support while adjusting to a new country. I also found similar experiences in an article republished by Hartford Public Schools in 2024, where my immigrant students described feeling isolated because of the language barriers and cultural differences. It became clear that Andrea's experience wasn't unique. The next thing I wanted to understand was what actually helps newcomer students become successful. One idea kept coming up during almost every interview. Students remember the people who helped them more than the lessons they learned. Andrea told me one of her teachers paired her with a classmate who spoke Spanish, giving her someone she could ask for help whenever she felt lost. I heard something similar from former ELD student Sofia Ibarra, whom I interviewed on July 22, 2026, in Salinas, California. She explained that her shelter teachers made it okay for her to make mistakes, which helped her build confidence and participate more in class. I also interviewed Miss Vigil, a shelter science teacher, on July 24, 2026. She explained that she uses visuals, sentence frames, and bilingual resources so students can focus on learning instead of worrying about speaking perfect English. Even though everyone had different experiences, they all pointed out to the same idea. The students learn more when they feel comfortable enough to participate. The last thing I learned was that support doesn't stop when students leave the classroom. During my interview with Ms. Rachel Torres, a high school community liaison, on July 21st, 2026, she explained to me that helping newcomer families understand the school system and connecting them to the resources is just as important as what happens during the class. When families feel supported, the students are more likely to succeed both academically and socially. Looking back at all my interviews, one message stood out more than anything else. The adults these students remembered weren't necessarily the ones who taught the best lessons. They were the ones who made them feel like they belong. That's probably the biggest lesson I learned throughout this project. Newcomer students already have the motivation to succeed. What they need is a school community that helps them believe they can. As I finished my research, one question still remained. If supported teachers make such a difference, why aren't all teachers prepared to support newcomer students? After everything I learned from my interviews and research, I became convinced that one change could make a real difference for newcomer students. That's the solution I'd like to talk to you, to share with you next. Personally, I believe every teacher, not just yearly teachers, should receive training on how to better support newcomer students. Newcomer students don't spend the entire day in English learner classes. They spend most of their day in other classes like math, science, history, and electives. If only a few teachers know how to support them, then the students are left struggling in many of the classrooms they attend every day. I wanted to know if teachers actually felt prepared to teach newcomer students, and after doing some research, I found out that a lot of them don't feel prepared to support newcomer students as they should. According to the RAND Corporation's report, Lost in Translation, published in 2025, about half the teachers who work with multilingual learners reported feeling either not at all prepared or only somewhat prepared to meet their students' needs. That statistic surprised me. It doesn't mean that teachers don't care about their students. It means that many teachers simply haven't been given the training they need. That idea became even clearer during my interview with Mr. Contreras, who is an administrator for a high school. He's a former ELD teacher and a former English learner. On July 21st of 2026 in Salinas, California, he explained to me that strategies like pre-teaching, vocabulary, modeling, assessment assignments, and giving students structured opportunities to practice speaking can completely change a student's classroom experience. But he also said those strategies only work if teachers know how to use them. I found the same message in research by Patricia Gandara and Lucrecia Santibáñez, published in Educational Leadership in 2016. They argue that good intentions are not good enough. Teachers need preparation if they want to effectively support English learners. Listening to Mr. Contreras and reading the research made me realize something. We ask newcomer students to adapt to a completely new country, language, and school system. The least we can do is prepare teachers to help them succeed. The next question I asked myself was whether teacher preparation actually changes students' experiences. And based on everything I heard, the answer is yes. During my interview with Luis Alvarado, a former ELD student, on July 22, 2026, he shared that learning English made him feel unsure of himself. There were times where he questioned whether he belonged at school. What happened wasn't just learning more English, it was having teachers who encouraged him, believed in him, and gave him confidence to keep trying. I heard something very similar from Andrea Agredo, another former ELD student whom I interviewed on July 24, 2026. She remembered teachers who checked in with her, paired her with classmates who could help her, and made sure that she never felt alone during her first months in school. Years later, she still remembers those teachers, not because they taught the best lesson, but because they made her feel like she belonged. Those stories are supported by research. In an article called Me Perdí en la Escuela, published in the journal Social Work in 2020, explains that newcomer students are more successful when schools intentionally create environments where students feel connected, supported, and included. I also found similar conclusions in research by Sofia Angeles, published in the Journal of Urban Learning, Teaching, and Research in 2021. Her research found that strong relationships with educators help newcomer students build confidence, stay engaged in school, and feel hopeful about the future. After hearing those interviews and reading those studies, I stopped thinking that teacher training was only about improving instructions. I realized that it's really about helping students when believe they belong and that they can be successful. One final interview reminded me why this matters so much. When I spoke with Ms. Jimenez, a high school counselor on July 24, 2026, she emphasized that newcomer students needed they need trusted adults who build relationships with them and help them feel safe, valued, and connected to their school community. She explained that students are much more willing to participate, ask questions, and overcome challenges when they know there is someone at school who believes in them. That conversation really stayed with me because every person I interview, um, every person, because every person I interview had a different job and different backgrounds and different perspectives. Yet they all came back to the same idea: relationships matter. So what can we do? I believe school districts should provide professional development that prepares every teacher, not just ELD teachers, who work with newcomer students. The training doesn't have to be complicated. It can include practical strategies like using visuals, encouraging students to participate without fear or making mistakes, understanding cultural adjustments, building positive relationships, and recognizing the challenges newcomer students face both inside and outside of the classroom. These are the small changes that can possibly affect how ELD students do in school. As students, parents, community, and future educators, we all have a voice. I encourage you to contact your local school district, principal, or school board members and let them know that every teacher, not just ELD teachers, should receive training on how to better support newcomer students. It could be an email, one conversation, one phone call. Small actions like these can create meaningful change for thousands of students. I'd like to leave you with one final thought. At the beginning of my presentation, I asked you to imagine walking into a school where you didn't know anyone and barely understood the language around you. Now imagine you're walking into the same school, but this time every teacher you meet knows how to make you feel welcome, understood, and capable of succeeding. Sometimes changing a student's life doesn't start with a new program or a new textbook. Sometimes it starts with a teacher who knows how to make the student feel like they belong. Thank you.